Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time talking episode 23 of season 3 of The Flash, Finish Line. So here we get our season finale, and it's good. I mean, it's really good. I was just so happy with this. I mean, The Flash has always known how to finish strong, but this was definitely a season where there were some bumps in the road. And the most notable one, I think, was just how at times the season seemed rather overwhelmingly grim, and they tried to fix that a little bit with the amnesia episode. But here, things end on a really much more positive note, and that there is this much more positive kind of feeling going through much of the episode, which is a little ironic given that it starts out on such an incredibly somber note. Now, the idea of HR replacing Iris using his gadget, well, I mean, that was something that the fandom figured out was probably going to be what they were going to do a long time ago. So that being the case, not really a surprise. The whole, we think he's dead, and then he wakes up and spends a surprisingly long time talking before he dies. I mean, that's a little much, but it works. And HR earned it. And it is kind of interesting that we have yet another Harrison Wells who was murdered by an evil speedster. But this was a nice wrap up of what HR's story was, and this is the idea that everybody counts, that everybody has something that they can contribute in a lot of ways. And I always sort of like stories like that where you have relatively ordinary people who find it within themselves to do extraordinary things. I mean, Iris is another example in this episode. The whole season was after a certain point was Barry trying to save Iris, but it's ultimately Iris who saves Barry. The person with no powers saves the hero. Nice stuff there. But getting back to HR, I did really like that story about John Lennon that they tell at the funeral, and that's a true story. That's a very well known incident that John Lennon mentioned and is often talked about when people discuss his life. And that was a really good way to frame things for HR. Now, granted, the whole thing with Tracy, again, it felt a little rushed, but here, I mean, it does pay off. You can really see why, after all of this, that she would want to try and continue to help Team Flash. And having her talk with Earth 2 Harrison Wells, that was also really, really nicely done. And of course, the show's not going to try and get rid of Tom Cavanaugh anytime soon. I mean, he's just such an amazing actor. What they're going to do with him next season, that remains to be seen. Obviously, Earth 2 Harrison Wells is going to be hanging around for a little while. Now, whether they're going to keep him around or bring in yet another version of Wells, I mean, that's something that's going to have to remain to be seen. But it's something I'm cool with either way. Nothing really particular to say about Joe this episode, but I do like how we see him up there on the roof. And this is a nice way of very subtly reminding us that in the original version of the timeline, it was HR who was up on the roof. And so by changing that, that's another little clue that, in the original timeline, Iris was for legit dead. So this was nice. And also, this is a nice way for HR to sort of earn a little redemption for his mistake last time around. And it's also kind of interesting that HR was repeatedly mocked by Savitar as just basically being a nobody. But it's ultimately him who opens up the key to making it possible for for Team Flash to achieve victory. I mean, it's not totally him. I mean, Iris, and Barry, and Wally, and everybody else pitched in. But if it wasn't for HR, knocking over that first domino, Iris would be dead. Nothing super huge to say about Julie in this episode, although I do like how it's like, okay, we now understand where he was last time around. He was off working with Caitlin's mom on The Cure. And it's an interesting choice that Caitlin sort of said. Well, Killer Frost says like, okay, I'm not going to take that. I can't just chug a potion and turn back into Caitlin. That person's gone. And I kind of like that you can't really just banish something that comes from within you with magic Kool-Aid, which is for what that gene therapy stuff is meant to be for all intents and purposes. Killer Frost is this darkness that was in Caitlin, an example of the darkness that's within all of us. And she thought that by becoming Killer Frost that Caitlin went away, but she now realizes like, no, there's these two sides of us that are in here, and I'm going to have to figure this out. I mean, oh man, the temptation to talk about Persona 4 here is almost overwhelming, but that would doubtlessly be needlessly confusing for people who have not played that game. If you have not played the series of Persona 4, it's fantastic. So much. Let's see. I'm kind of wondering if she isn't going to start using the name Louise Lincoln, just because that would just be a really nice little twist on the mythology of the comics. But again, that's just me spitballing. Nothing really particularly huge to say about Wally here. I mean, him and Savitar squaring off, that and the fight in general had some really great effects, and it was really moving to see Barry officially pass the torch on to Wally, even though Wally's not quite there yet in terms of ready to be the Flash, but he's definitely getting there. I will say one serious mark against this episode, though, was there being no Jesse Quick. I mean, if there was ever a time when Jesse kind of needed to take a break from Earth 2, this is it. On the other hand, we do kind of get things made up by having Gypsy show back up, which was really cool. And, like we're saying, well, we're connected. I vibed you from across the multiverse. That really does feed in nicely to her ongoing relationship with Cisco. And, I love seeing Cisco snark at Savitar. Savitar kind of holds the hand up to him, and Cisco doesn't even blink. And then Savitar turns around, it's like, oh yeah, I'm not going to kill you. If you don't do what I tell you, I'm going to kill Caitlin. Which does work, and then Cisco turns it around on him, and I love that line that Barry gives him. It's like, you've always been my hero. And it's genuine. I mean, Cisco is someone that Barry holds in the highest regard. He's Barry's best friend. And Cisco is always, he's made his share of mistakes. Cisco's always been the biggest cheerleader for, let's go out there, let's be heroes, let's do the right thing. I mean, the Cisco from the future was still that person. Even though he was a broken and damaged man, he still wanted to make the world a better place. And he wanted to do it the right way. With a little stuff over there. But, that's all well and good. Let's see. I also really liked what they did with the whole idea of Barry taking what Snart had said to heart, and being angry isn't going to solve that problem. And Barry has that really great speech. It's like, I've used my anger before, and that's not going to cut it this time. And this is kind of a theme that really resonates with me, just because when I look at the way the world is now, particularly on the internet, there's so many people, and I remember who are just like, they're all about anger. I remember I was arguing with somebody one time on the internet. I was saying, basically saying, it was like, whatever, something bad had happened. Of course, people were upset, and I said, well, of course, this is an upsetting situation, but we shouldn't let our anger get the better of us here. And this other person came back and countered me. He's like, no, anger is fuel. Anger can kind of keep you going. It's what gives you that, drive to go out there and, fight against the injustice of the world. And I kind of pointed to them, was like, okay, do you make your best decisions when you're angry? Are you more likely to consider other people's perspectives when you're angry? Are you more likely to be willing to achieve some sort of a compromise with another person. If you're angry, are you willing to, when you're angry, look at yourself and say, is it possible that in this situation I'm wrong? And of course, the answer is no. I can't remember who it was, but there was an ancient Greek philosopher that I read about once who described anger as a temporary madness. Which, there is something to that, although I think that's a bit harsh. I think, oddly enough, the wisest thing I've ever heard about anger, it came from Stick, a line he had in season 2 of Daredevil on Netflix. And it really struck me, so much so that I made it a point to memorize it. And there's this point in the season where Stick says, anger is a spark. Outrage is a wildfire, uncontrolled and therefore useless. And we live in a time, especially online, where outrage is just never ending. Some people even use the term outrage lifestyle, which I'm not going to get into that, but I do think that I understand kind of what they're referring to. But bringing it back around, the whole thing with anger is, anger can be a spark to kind of make us want to do something. But it's really when we're calm, when we're thinking clearly, when we're not letting our emotions control us, and like in this episode, like Barry, where we're willing to extend a kind hand, even to those who have wronged us, that's when we're really doing the right thing in our lives. That's when we're really not being heroes, just being what human beings should be. And Savitar does genuinely seem to consider, kind of what Barry is offering. But, this doesn't last. He realizes, like, hey, as soon as Barry makes new memories with Iris, I'm going to remember them, but I'm not going to be able to be with her. This isn't a situation where they fix his face and give him another identity and he just kind of goes on about his merry life. Every time something happens with Barry, Savitar's going to remember it. He's going to be living... Barry's life is still constantly going to be in his own head. He's going to be watching someone else be with the woman that he loves. And, man, how horrible is that? Team Flash, I mean, they're coming at this with the best of intentions. But Savitar does have a point that, what kind of life can I possibly have? And, that's a valid point. So, of course, this all goes south, and we get the big fight, which brings back Jay Garrick. And, that was good. I mean, that fight, it was only something like a minute and a half, but it's just like, oh man, this is some of the best stuff they have ever done on this show. Man, I don't know. I mean, just in terms of the emotional rush I got out of it, I don't know if they're ever going to top the, Firestorm, Green Arrow, Flash versus Reverse Flash thing. I mean, I have that favorited as one of a clip of that favorited on my YouTube channel. Just when I ever kind of want to go back and watch some of my favorite videos, that's on there. But oh man, this was some great stuff. Barry knocking Savitar out of the armor, and then him putting it on and the thing turning red. I mean, I thought the whole thing with him, okay, I'm gonna kill you. It's like, wait a minute, just a little while ago you were all about I'm gonna try and be compassionate here. Now, granted, Savitar has gone back to being a bad guy, and he's trying to become a god and all this other stuff. And again, Barry has really good reasons to be angry, but then Savitar just has to kind of go and basically strike me down with all your hatred. And it's just like, oh, come on, dude. You are Barry. You have to have known. Wait, I can't believe you didn't realize what that reaction would be from him. So, yeah. That was exactly the wrong thing for Savitar to say in that situation, but it makes perfect sense that he would say that. Also, Cisco saying reverse the polarity of the neutron flow, like just such a classic Doctor Who line. And what's even great is they don't even reference that this is a Doctor Who line. It sounds like just comic book pseudoscience that we would expect on the show. You only get it if you're like a real big time Doctor Who fan, or at least you have some familiarity with the classic series. Yeah. To me, Tom Baker is always going to be the best Doctor. So yeah. Let's see. What else do we have to talk about? Oh yeah, what happens after they save the day? Just like I expected, we're gonna have that happy moments at the end of it where everything seems great, just like before, and then there's the knife in the heart, and they do that so well. But I like how it's presented that Barry isn't going off to Speed Force hell. It's even explicitly stated to be heaven, and that's kind of what the Speed Force has been referenced as, sort of like the heaven for speedsters who are good. And if the ones who are bad, well, that's what we get the Black Flash for. Now Killer Frost icing Black Flash, pardon the pun, with just like, okay, that was kind of weak. That was kind of weak, but it does make sense. I mean, cold does have the ability to basically slow down molecules. I mean, cold is basically just molecules are vibrating at a much slower speed as they move. When things are hot, they move at a much faster speed, and that's what like absolute zero is. If I remember correctly, the point where the molecules just like flat out stop moving 100%. It's never my best subject, but I can do reasonably well in it. But I'm sure that we have not seen the last of the Black Flash, and just have that line. It's like having her kind of like correct, like what would she say? It's like, "See you later, Hunter." It's just like, yeah, that was a good one. Oh man, Zoom was such a jerk, such a bastard. Oh, let's see. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens next season. You also have to wonder just why, in the name of God, did the people of Central City tolerate Star Labs being there? Because stuff like this is always happening at Star Labs. Like, I'm sure somebody knows. It's like, hey, when all hell broke loose, there was this big flash of light that shot the sky from Star Labs. But yeah, we'll see what happens. So guys, thanks for joining me again this season. It's been a really fun ride. I will, of course, be back for Season 4 of The Flash. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. You can also join me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi, and you can find me on Tumblr at Jedi Reviewer. Till next time, take care and have a good